where there's a Mobile Bay breeze and magnolia trees, a walk down a calm eastern shore, sailboats in sight, a pelican's flight, dear Fairhope, Alabama, my heart is yours.
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone? Good. Welcome to the 2025 Fairhope Single Tax Lecture Series. We're in our 10th year, and this is our second lecture for the season. So we're going to just let Mr. Todd Frank take it away. He's the Associate Director of Gulf Coast Extension. So please give him a warm welcome.
Good evening. I'm Todd Frank. Give you a little biography. I grew up on a farm in Alberta. Attended Foley High School, and I graduated from Auburn in 2002 with a degree in ag economics and minor in agronomy. Prior to this, I was working on my personal farm over in Alberta, and then right after I got out of Auburn, I went to Agri-SC, which was an ag chemical company out of Montgomery. I'm going to give a little bit brief history of Auburn University, Alabama Extension Service, and the Gulf Coast Research and Extension Center. So in 1972, the Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical School became the first land-grant college in the South for the Morrill Act. In 1887, the Agricultural Experiment Station was formed due to the federal act, the Hatch Act of 1887. So the main location was the Auburn campus. And in 1896, we had the old rotation began to do a rotation between the legumes and cotton or straight cotton. And that's the world's oldest cotton study is still being done. Okay, and the Alabama Extension Service, it began in 1915 through the Smith and Lever Act. It was a joint venture between Auburn University and Alabama A&M. The primary goal of the Extension Service was to go from the research at the experiment station and decimate that, or send that information out to the public, the general public, to farmers, homemakers, pretty much everybody. In the 1990s, that Extension Service changed its name to the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service. And in every county in Alabama has an extension agent. They went to sort of to a regional thing, like for the agronomy side, they'll have one agronomy agent be covering like 4 counties. And forestry the same way, but there's also the home economics and stuff like that still in the counties. These were a few old pictures from the very beginning, the Alabama Experiment Service, Extension Service. This is where they made, teaching some farmers how to build some terraces, because there was some extreme land washing away, and the farmers didn't know how to prepare the land, or they didn't know about building terraces to prevent the washing and deterioration of the farmland. And then here are some women extension service agents teaching the homemaker and some horticultural stuff. And this is a group of, this is a whole group of the extension agents. That one's in Tuskegee and this one's in Auburn. On the left, can't remember what that, let me see one notes on that. Oh yeah, that was a hotbed. They're building hotbeds for potatoes in the ground to start them. And that's the website for if anybody ever needs information for the Extension Service. All right, the Alabama Experiment Stations, in 1927, they decided to have some outline units besides the one on campus. That way it'd be more of a regional type thing. The ornamental horticultural substation started because a professor was requested from the Satsuma growers to be stationed in Mobile to study insects and diseases on Satsumas. The first large substations were formed in 1929 and 1930. You see those with the Tennessee Valleys, Sand Mountain, Wiregrass, Gulf Coast, very diverse regions. And in the 1930s, the Department of Agronomy of Auburn had these 3 fields, experiment fields. That was primarily the Department of Agronomy. They weren't tied to the experiment stations until the 1960s, I believe. They swapped over to being part of Alabama Experiment Substation. And then some of the other later locations that formed in the 1940s were the Piedmont and the North Alabama and Chilton area horticulture, and the upper and lower coastal substation. In 1978, Auburn decided to move the main station from Auburn to E.V. Smith, which is just outside of between Shorter and Tallahassee. And that farm consists of about 3,000 acres. So they wanted a prime, state-of-the-art farm there. And then in 1991, they have a plant science research center they opened. That's mainly for greenhouse. That is all greenhouses, and they're doing nematode studies, plant, like starting breeding lines and peanuts, cotton, soybeans, a lot of horticultural work, and that's still on the campus. This is a little map of where everything's located. And we went to a regional thing, regional forum, and so we're in the lower region, and southern region, and Jared, who's over me, which would be the regional director, he is responsible for the ornamental station in Mobile, the Bruton station in Bruton, and Headland, Wiregrass area. Here's an old picture from when 104 was a dirt road. It was in the 1930s. And those houses are still there. The offices to the left. The house to the right is a superintendent house.
It looks so close to the road.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So the Gulf Coast Research Center was formed in 1930, as I said, and originally started as 725 acres. Now we're up to about 800 acres. It was donated by many individuals when Fairhope was being developed, I guess you would say. The primary studies the research center was looking at was satsumas, small vegetables, your truck farm crops, and free range cattle, chickens, and Irish potatoes was starting to be a big industry. So with the free range cattle, the research center started fencing in and starting to plant some various grasses to get better forages for them. And the first crop was started in 1931. Here's some where it first started clearing some land. You got the firewood there. That's the superintendent house and the assistant superintendent house. It's built right into where they cut the timber out. All right, these are our past superintendents. A lot of them worked there for a lot of years. Then they started, probably a lot of them started as assistant superintendent and moved up to superintendent. Like Malcolm, who I took Malcolm's place when he retired in 2023, he was there for 37 years. Yeah. And most of them have been there for 30 plus years. So when they came down here and settled all his land, and after it was donated, they had to clear the land, for past years, build the superintendent's houses and laborers' houses. Had to build barns for the store the crops and house and mules, and they had to get some drinking water. This is the houses right there. That's a machine shop. They have to fabricate most everything because everything is rural around here. So a lot of stuff had to be built out of wood and steel, and basically build a lot of farming. It's been doing research. They didn't have a Amazon to get pick up a piece of research equipment. And here's the labor cottages. They're pretty small, but they're rent free. They got it. A lot of them, they had a garden on the experiment farm. Later on, they had dairy, so they get free milk. They had eggs, so it was pretty nice to live there. Even though the pay probably wasn't great, but housing was provided. Now here's some farm buildings later on. That one to the right, that's what they call the truck barn. That's where they did a lot of packing, the vegetable crops or various crops, corn and stuff. And the one off to the left is the machine shop. And the one, the tall building to the right, that's what the old mule barn. And all the buildings are still on the farm. And here's where they cleared some pastures. You see the stumps still in there. Probably couldn't get them out, so just probably let them rot. Okay, as I said, the Irish potatoes, that was a big crop in Baldwin County in the 1920s, 1930s, all the way up through the 40s. I forgot how many millions of tons of potatoes were grown every year. But the main problem they were having was seed issues. So the experiment farm started cutting, if everybody knows how potato seed is cut, cut potatoes, you quarter it or get various sizes. Well, they did research on various sizes of seed pieces, and they found out the ideal seed pieces, how many ounces that seed piece should, and eyes it should have, and pass that information on to Irish potato farmers. Also, there are truck crops, because a lot of people were just settlers, so they had 40 acres, but they had to clear it themselves. So they might grew some cucumbers, took them to Mobile, took them to Fairhope, took them to Pensacola. So they were just planting a little garden, hoping to sell some too. Of course, the pasture, the forages, and the grains, that's for the livestock at the experiment farm. They had to feed the mules, horses, and cattle and chicken. Here's a picture of a cabbage field at the experiment station in the 1930s. That's quite a big cabbage. And here's a peach tree. This was in the 1960s. That tree was only 3 years old, and it produced 3.5 bushels of peaches. And then here's a block of satsumas. You see mostly bare ground. They tried to keep all the weeds away from it, keep it from having competition, and they mounted dirt around it to keep the soil warm around the trees. Here's a larger block of satsumas. At one time, I believe they said they had 45 acres of satsumas on the experiment farm. All right, and back to the free-range cattle. Cattle, before the fencing laws started in Alabama, most everybody had their cows, just let them free range, let them roam the woods, and then they get some people, they rustle them up, call them up, and take them to the stockyard. But the state of Alabama changed the law in 1939, and it came in effect in 1941 to outlaw all open range grazing. So Auburn University, Gulf Coast Research Center, started looking at improved pastures. They thought the pastures should be grown on the poorest land and save the good land for the truck crops and potato crops. And they mainly were using carpet grass and common lespedeza. And their forage quality wasn't too great. So in 1938, and they said, well, we're going to put it on our little more productive land and change it to Dow's grass and white clover. And they saw dramatic increases. And there were a lot of publications that were sent out to farmers throughout Alabama with these findings. Everybody had the same thought: put the cows on the poorest land. And then they started winter grazing so they didn't have to supplement the cows so much. And they used crimson clover, small grains like oats, wheat, ryegrass, rye, and they were able to sustain those animals for almost 300 days without any supplemental feed, hay or anything. Here's them planting some improved pastures. On the left there, they're planting some crimson clover and some small grains. And there's some cows and some clover right there across from the substation. Okay, in 1942, the dairy started. There was over 100 dairies in Baldwin County at that time. The primary focus was to produce the most efficient way to produce forage is while having do silage, a lot of silage, or buying a lot of feed or anything like that. So they went more intense in your clovers, sorghum, Sudan grass, summer annuals, and things like that. And in the 1970s, they got into doing some research on lagoon waste management and wastewater recycling, because that was sort of environmental stuff started kicking in, and they just couldn't just pump it out in the fields and stuff. So they had to figure out a way to recycle it and make sure their fertility wasn't going too far up in their fields. But in 1985, all dairies were toward tail end. I know there's some in the early 90s still, but they just decided to close up the dairy in 1985 and stop the research. E.V. Smith continued on until I think like late 1990s. And then we do some pecan research. That started probably in the 1940s and 1960s, mainly looking at various varieties. Y'all know pecans. Everybody had pecan. Any farmers, everybody had a pecan orchard. So they're trying to figure out how to manage those, what kind of nutrients would it take to produce them efficiently, and look at various pests and diseases that were infecting their trees. Well, the pecan industry is taking its toll because of various hurricanes. It's still active at the Gulf Coast Research Center. We're doing a lot of weed control in the rows, still looking at various varieties too. And then here's we're going to talk about soybean research. This is a plant date study. The one on the left was planted like 2 weeks before the ones on the right. So soybeans, they started doing research in the 1950s. They first looked at soybeans as a forage crop, not as the beans. Then the demands for the actual soybeans increased, so they started doing studies on varieties, plant dates, fertilities, pest management. They had a nematode test in Alberta. That soil is a little sandier, more conducive to nematodes compared to the experiment station. They had 2 fields, and they operated that until the 1990s. In 2004, we all know what happened there, was Hurricane Ivan came in, and that's when soybean rust was discovered in Baldwin County, Louisiana, for the first time. And that was a very devastating disease. They had most all the cropland at the experiment station those next few years were planted to soybeans for fungicide trials. Soybeans research still continued. We're still looking at plant dates, a lot of varieties and trials and new varieties. We're looking at some new technology on some soybeans. The picture on the left is Harold Yates. He's looking at some beans that actually were no-tilled in the 1950s. And and the one on the left and one on the right were, I'm sorry, one on the right were no-tilled and one on the left were tilled. They said it had good yields in the no-tilled, but it was a problem with harvesting, probably with the weeds and stuff growing up in there. This is Dr. Funch's looking over a soybean variety trial. That was in the 1930s at the main campus substation. Here's our cotton research. So, in the cotton research didn't start until the 1980s. There are very few acres south of I-10 of cotton. And when I was growing up, I didn't remember seeing any cotton around until early 90s. The government changed the legislation in part of the quota system, so they were able to allow new growing areas, for instance, South Baldwin County and Mobile County, to start growing cotton. So they had to do a lot of research because these farmers, I mean, most farmers locally had never been around, so they had to learn about PGR, plant growth regulators, plant dates, fertility, defoliation, pest management, and so in the 1990s, the BT cotton came out, which was in 1995, there's a bad worm outbreak, and farmers were trying to spray worms. They were spraying them every week, and they couldn't kill them. So 96, I believe it was. Maybe it was 94 the worms were. 95 was when Monsanto came out with a technology in their cotton to where the worm would take a bite basically and die from the toxin. It's just a biological, I mean, it's a natural chemical that's in, that you can actually spray in your garden, but it's introduced into the cotton plant. The cotton research still continues in the Gulf Coast Research Center, and we're still looking at new varieties on that too. Still doing some nematode tests on it, diseases, because we're so close to, our area's so prone to high humidity, and cotton is such a big plant, it gets a lot of diseases in them. That's, they're picking the cotton trial right there. And peanuts research, that started in the 90s too. That was the same thing with the cotton. There's a quota system, and nobody in the southwest Alabama grew any peanuts. Most everything was over in the wiregrass area, and that was predominantly where all the research was done. So, like I said about the cotton, the peanuts, they grow low to the ground, they're very bushy, and humidity, dewy morning, dewy evenings, we get a lot more diseases. We make good yields, but we have to put a lot of fungicides out. We're looking at different varieties that work for here that may not work for the wiregrass. In the peanut research, we're still looking at diseases and varieties. Now here's some satsumas and some horticultural crops we do. Research started in the 1930s on the satsumas. The satsuma market had been there since the late teens in Mobile, and started in Mobile, Baldwin County a little later. They're looking at cold hardy varieties and freeze protection. And well, in the 40s and 50s, there were some very cold winters, and they did not have the right varieties. And the freeze protection, they had to water the trees to freeze them, make them freeze to give them at 32 degrees, no colder. They weren't using that technique, and a lot of some of the industry was wiped out in that time period. And it didn't come back to the 1990s when they started overspraying with water the actual leaves, and then they're spraying the stem, the trunk of the tree too. And we're still studying. We got small research on satsuma, a couple of varieties. And we've got some grapefruits too. There's been some peach research done. It's hard for us to grow it. Peaches down here because of low chill hours. There's only a few out there, that will work. And a lot of times, our peach is a little bit smaller than we can get from Chilton County. We're doing a little bit of kiwi research, looking at some varieties that Auburn has developed. We're doing some various types of different pruning and looking at different, the kiwi has to have a male and female plant. So we're looking at different male plants to go with various female plants. There's some kiwi and some peaches. And here's a calf that was just born. And then right now, currently, we're running a semi-Angus cow-calf herd. Our inventory runs from 225, 250 mama cows and calves together. We'll sell those calves in the summertime around July, except for about 20, 25 heifer retained. We don't bring any outside female cows in, except we only bring in bulls to diversify our genetics a little bit. We're mainly looking at forages and various types of ways to wean calves. Like I said, about the summer pastures and winter, we can graze cows for up to 30 days with no supplemental feed. Some of the local, regional, and national influences that this Gulf Coast research has on is our temperate climate is ideal for plants and diseases and insects to blow up. Plus our tropical, the tropical storms and hurricanes, they can bring up diseases from South America, which they might come from China, like the Asian soybean rust. It had started in 1906 or something in Japan, but then it started in South America and stayed there for many years. But when Ivan came through, it brushed South America and brought the spores into the Gulf Coast of the United States. So with the various diseases, it's a very good place to do fungicide and insecticide research. Locally, farmers look at our variety trials and make the decisions for next year. And that way they can see, instead of having to look at a farm over in Wiregrass or North Alabama, which they do that too, but they'd like to see the information close by. Regionally, the peanut and cotton breeders, they come from throughout the Southeast with new breed lines. They do this before they release it to the farmers to see if they can handle extreme conditions. And that's about it. So, thank you. That's my contact information. And I'm open for any questions.
So today, at the facility, what is your primary focus on what crops that they're working on currently?
Okay, so your question was about what was our primary crops?
Yeah, what's going on today?
Yes, sir. Mainly we're working on row crops, peanuts, cotton, corn, soybeans. We're doing a little bit of cattle research. I'm seeing it probably going to increase with cattle prices come up. And that's the main thing is whatever is prices go up, that's where we get a lot more research money from. And like cotton, peanuts, we always have research money for that. It's good research money. And horticulture, we're about to start a new peach trial. I'm looking for cold hardiness on those. And they're working with the University of Georgia on that.
Is your pecan, you got the pecan trees, your orchard there?
Yes, sir.
Is that pretty much established and you have a, I guess you call it a continuational program?
Yeah.
To monitor and.
Yes, it is, because it takes so many years for a pecan to produce, and you have to see, it takes at a minimum of 8 years. 15 to 20 is going to be your prime thing. You got to see, if you're, how long these trees are going to last. And over the life of the tree. So some of those trees are pretty old in there. Some of them got wiped out, like some of the old trees got wiped out by the hurricane, Sally.
So how'd you get ready for the snowstorm? We're running around our yard covering up our little bitty bushes.
Yeah. Well, like the Satsumas, we let them go because they weren't, yeah. They're, with the wind and snow and stuff, and there wasn't any blooms on there. And plus, that's a cold hardiness test, so we just let it go. Water, we shut off all the water. Cows, we had to check every day, break ice in their troughs. But that's pretty much it. So. Yes, ma'am.
How many students are enrolled in this program right now?
How many students enrolled? We don't have any students in our location. I'm not quite sure what Auburn, I know they've had a lot of growth at the campus. We do have a lot of research, graduate students come and do their research projects. We probably have, I'd say about 20 research students, graduate students. Everybody from getting their masters, PhDs come down here and do their experiments. And we work with them. Yes, sir.
In 1961, I worked on the potato shed that was located where this building is right now.
Yes, sir.
And we loaded the trucks right about here, roughly. And at that time, potato farmers could make about $1,000 an acre, clear about $1,000 an acre growing potatoes. And I wonder, what can they do now?
That's a good question. That's a good question. There's nothing that could make
What happened to the potato industry for here?
refrigeration. Yeah, because at that time they're growing potatoes, from Florida, and they moved to Alabama, Georgia, and they slowly moved up to the Midwest. But with refrigeration, they were able to store the potatoes longer, and that's why now there's some still in Florida, but most of them in Idaho and out west. So. Yes, ma'am.
If we visited the extension, would we be walking in or through a building where we would see students or you or some doing actual experiments? Is that where the research is going on?
We're mainly like a working farm, and everything's out in the field, so we don't have like a building. All the information or samples, they get sent up to Auburn. So we're just collecting the samples, and the graduate students, or they'll say somebody from campus come now, or we'll deliver it. But
Tell me some of the things that you send up there during this.
okay, like right now we're doing forage trials. We got ryegrass, rye, oats, wheat forages. It's basically like we cut it like every month, and we'll weigh it at plot, and then we'll pull a sample, a wet sample, take a weight of it, and then we'll dry it down. And then once it's dried down, we'll take another weight, and then we'll take that sample, and then they'll look up there at Auburn. They'll look at the nutrient value, like the protein, the crude fiber, and all that. And then so that they get the yield of it and the quality of the forage.
How many full-time employees do you have?
We've got 7. Yeah. They had time, I think, 20 or 30 of them when the dairy were open. They had dairy crew and a field crop crew.
Not students.
Not student workers. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Well, we moved here about 11 years ago, and for several years, when I would drive down 104, I saw banana plants, and then they'd freeze, and then they'd come back and freeze. What were y'all doing?
They were just trying to see if it was a viable crop, and obviously, if we didn't make it.
You mentioned the high humidities in the morning, or the dew in the morning and the dew in the evening, and that, of course, brings on the pest.
Yes, sir.
So here we are, average gardeners in our yard, and it looks like by July, we just have to say, okay, I'm turning it over to
That's basically, yeah, that's basically it. I mean, your gardening about finished by July. You're fortunate. Yes, ma'am.
Of the buildings, like you showed those old cottages, are any of those still around?
Yes, ma'am. We've got 4 labor cottages are still around. Some have been turned into offices for extension, and we have a fisheries, Dr. Zillemeyer. He's with fisheries. He goes out in the Gulf and catches red snapper, but he's got 2 houses there, and we have one is a pecan researcher.
I noticed that you protect the surrounding of the site with high fencing. So in my little mind, I'm thinking you're trying to keep the animals from coming in to mess up your results of your testing and growing.
Are you talking about on 13 there? On County Road 13?
Yes.
Yeah, that was some deal they had with the for the wildlife, to protect the wildlife. I wish we had a high fence all the way around. We have a lot of deer pressure. We have where the peaches and blueberries, and we do have blueberries, I forgot to mention that, and kiwi, we got a high fence, electric fence, but they go right through it because those peaches are too tempting for them.
The state would probably give you a license to harvest them.
Harvest the deer? Yeah, I wish.
They should do that.
I heard there've been quite a few killed right there on 13, hit by cars. Yeah.
They just cleared a bunch of property, like, was that your property?
It was. So that was some old growth timber, and they just went back and planted some longleaf pines in there. Yeah, it was mainly just mixed loblolly / whatever. It was just growing up, but yeah, so they're looking at a longleaf study in there.
All right, so it's not a new subdivision?
No. Yeah. Yes,
Do
ma'am.
you give tours of the extension?
We do. The various organizations, like Master Gardeners and some schools and stuff. And sometimes, if a group of individuals, say 20 people, they want to get up with us one day in the early spring or late fall, we're not so much in the or even in the middle of summer, mainly not the harvest or planting season, we can accompany some tours.
I just have one more. You mentioned that there were around 100 dairies in Baldwin County.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any left?
No.
Okay.
I was talking to Cecil Euchre. He's talking about how many dairies when he used to open up old time feed, and he said there's none.
What happened? What was the natural cause for all that to go away?
Government buyout when.
Have subdivisions impacted also the farming in Baldwin County? More money in making houses than?
It has. I don't think it's so much the farmers. I think it's the absentee landowners. So many generations are away from the farms now. Their parents may have had 40 acres. They just sat on that 40 acres for 20 or 30 years and said, why have the land in Baldwin County? And then that farmer's going to lose that 40 acres, which might have been his best land. So yeah, it's affecting the farmer tremendously.
How do you counter that, or can you?
I don't know. Educate people, I guess. And people got to realize where the food's coming from. It does not come from Walmart or Winn-Dixie or Publix. You got to realize it's got to be grown, and we need a diverse growing area. I know around Huntsville, they're losing a lot of farmland too. And that's very productive land. So
But you're going to have to start growing things in very small spaces. Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
That's a new research.
Yes. All right, thank you.